Tonight's topic is Hermetic astrology, but I suppose I should give two disclaimers. Because astrology is more than just the horoscopes or just our birth chart. It can also have an intimate connection with our spiritual attainment, our spiritual life, our inner life. And so that's more what this topic is geared towards tonight. So if you came here hoping to understand how you're a Cancer and your partner's a Taurus and you just wanted to make it work, that's not exactly what this lecture's about. So sorry to disappoint. And perhaps also the second disclaimer should be I am an Aquarius, so I apologize if I spiral off and lose what I'm thinking about. But please be patient. I'll get to the point eventually. Now, so Hermetic astrology, this system, perhaps I should mention where this comes from, or this technique, or this mini system comes from, is this comes from the Rosicrucian schools, which is a Western, what would you call it, a magic school, initiatory school. They're a bit mysterious, because there are many different Rosicrucian schools, and they all claim to be the true Rosicrucian school. So you can tell just by that there's a little, some interesting things happen when they kind of meet or I don't know, when they sort of have mini fights with each other or whatnot. But nonetheless, what's important is to dive into them or see what are they really talking about. But one of the interesting things about these Rosicrucians is they had that mentality of synthesis. In one of the original works by the Rosicrucians, they mentioned, when they talked about themselves in these manifestos, they said, we practice three things. We practice three things: Kabbalah, magic, and alchemy. And that's pertinent for this topic, because although I've called it, it's astrology, there's this Hermetic word here. The Hermetic art, the royal art. There is an alchemical connotation to these practices. But alchemy not just is in, Bunsen burners and vials filled with chemicals. That's just normal laboratory alchemy. There's a more spiritual side of alchemy. Alchemy had a very mystic inner part of it. It said that the alchemists, what they were talking about was a process in nature. In many alchemical manuscripts, they always keep on saying, read the book of nature, read the book of nature, don't read this text, read the book of nature. But the understanding is that nature goes through a process, and they used many metaphors. They talked about metals turning into other metals in the bowels of the earth. Like, they believed that all metals eventually turn into gold, so tin eventually transmutes or grows into gold in the bowels of the earth, and same with lead and mercury and all those other metals. So the idea is you align yourself with nature and imitate or do some kind of process, and then that within you creates this gold, or within you there's spiritual gold. Some spiritual transformation happens within you. So it's very interesting. A lot of Western systems have some sort of connotation like that. You create a new man, or like the Masonic ones, you must recreate the temple, or there's the body of glory must be created within you. Which is like a secondary body, like a superior astral body. So there's all these interesting connections, and they're very, like full-bodied. And it's an interesting thing to note that a lot of the Western systems were like this, but this is like prior to influence from the East. Because I also mentioned the subtitle for this, I think I put it as something as like the 12 zodiacal gates and initiation. Initiation meaning to begin. But esoteric initiation is more something profound. You could describe it succinctly, you could say esoteric initiation is merely the extension of consciousness. At the moment we have this consciousness here and now, and our consciousness works in certain different ways to sense into the world. We have faculties, we have organs that correspond to faculties, like smell and sight and taste. But there are also psychic organs within us that have atrophied. So by extending the consciousness, we perhaps rejuvenate or revitalize things that have decayed over time within us. And these things then extend the consciousness, extend our senses. We are then initiated into a new world. And so initiation in the West was kind of full body. There's a line sometimes you hear in certain schools or literature where they say, initiation in the West begins at the feet. And specifically, there's one author I'll mention who says, the secret to initiation is vibrating the feet, but he doesn't kind of explain it. It's very Western. It's like they say one thing, they don't explain it. But it's interesting to know because in the East, initiation starts at the base of the spine, i.e. the Kundalini yoga and whatnot. So there's this interesting thing that starts to happen in, you could say like the 1800s when kind of Eastern texts get translated into Western language, and you start to see these Western esoteric schools practicing ceremonial magic, and then they just just slam in some Kundalini yoga and start mixing together. So you get some very interesting systems where you get kind of certain activities and operations, but then like some of them have like a yogic flavor to them, which is very interesting. So I kind of have this system to present, but I should say immediately the source for this is not me. I'm merely the channel. But anyway, the source of this isn't me. The source of this is a German author called Dr. Arnaldo Krumheller, who back in the day, he was quite a famous Rosicrucian, although you don't hear much about him anymore. In fact, it's like 10 years ago when I first kind of started, or more than 10 years ago now, geez, when I first started kind of looking and trying to find things, I ran across his name and I tried to find his books, and it was just impossible to find his books. It's only recently that a lot of them have started to get translated into English. So this book is called, by Arnaldo Krumheller, it's called Gnostic Rosicrucian Astrology. So if you want to get the name, you can come up afterwards and give it a flick through it. And there are some other books a little bit like that as well. But in that, he gives, it's a good book. You can try it out for yourself, and they have some nice essays and excerpts in the back as well. But nonetheless, to move on to this idea, or to move on to this system requires some understandings. First, we need to understand what is man, or what is our place in nature. Because we have a certain place in the hierarchy of nature, I'm not sure if you could say that, but we are something to nature. What we are, and this is kind of Gurdjieffian, but what we are is a type of antenna. We receive and we give off energy. We are a part of the economy of nature. And so, because I mean, if you think about it, think of like a radio as a good example, as an analogy. A radio has all of these marvelous little things and, different kind of buttons on it, and it has all these different mechanical things on the inside or electronic things on the inside. But if you took away the antenna, it would be useless. However, if you have an antenna on a radio, all of a sudden it can pick up invisible forces and translate them into something, into sound, into someone speaking. So in that way, we are an antenna for certain cosmic forces and terrestrial forces, or certain energy, multiple energies in the nature, found in nature. And they course through us, but most of the time it's done unconsciously, and also in our unconscious states, perhaps with certain blockages within us, we are actually bad antennas. So the energy, there should be celestial energy coming into us and collecting in our heart, but most people it doesn't, kind of bounces off or just flows through us. And there should be terrestrial energy coming up and meeting that celestial energy, and there should be some kind of internal marriage. But instead the terrestrial energy just kind of gets to here, and then it goes out in most people. And that's what happens to the terrestrial energy in most people, and it doesn't go there, it's just wasted, or it goes out and it creates a new body for a new essence to incarnate. So we have this perspective, perception of man. And then man has all of these different, what would you call them, chambers that relate to the different zodiac signs. As you can see here in an image I prepared earlier, I call him Mr. Big Head. As you can tell, I'm an artist. So we have this image, and it's a rough kind of, I'm not that good at art, okay. But you can see many images like this on the internet. And they connect, or in life, and they connect certain parts of the body to certain signs of the zodiac. So to go through them, to give a rough show of, you have Aries in the head, specifically, like the forehead kind of thing, the ram's horns. I'm not sure if you've noticed, people who have like a lot of kids who are Aries, you kind of see like kids, like toddlers who are Aries almost always have bruises on their head because they're always like running into things. So you kind of have like Aries is the head, Taurus is the neck. So I don't know, there's this thing with like a lot of Taurian men, not all of them, or even people who have a lot of Taurus in their chart, sometimes they get really thick necks. The next one, Gemini, corresponds to the arms or sometimes the lungs because it's the twins. There's Cancer is the chest, overall chest, or in women specifically the breasts, the mammary glands. And then Leo is also the chest, but something deeper. It's the heart itself, that solar beating, pulsing thing that gives all the blood and regulates the blood in the human machine. Next is Virgo, which is the abdominal cavity, which is said that there's some authors have said like people born under the sign of Virgo will be doomed to be afflicted with, was it, flatulence and indigestion their entire life. And it's like, oh, okay, sucks to be them. But I remember my mum was a Virgo and she was always like looking up diets and acid reflux things, and I was like, oh man, okay, maybe there is some truth to it. But then Libra corresponds sometimes to the hips, but specifically to the kidneys. And also you could say some of the lower organs in here also correspond to Libra. So things like the spleen and the liver, they're on the opposite side of each other, so they balance each other. It's like it's Libra, the scales. Then of course there's Scorpio, which is in the sex, and if anyone has ever met a Scorpio, I don't need to explain why it's there. Next, we have Sagittarius in the thighs. Sagittarius is they're known to be very sporty. And it's interesting to note, there's no particular organ in the thighs, but the thighs are important esoterically because there's a lot of blood, like femoral arteries, there's a huge amount of blood there, so the practices there are to magnetize the blood. If you've read Steiner's little lecture on the occult significance of blood, you know blood is very important, especially to black magicians who like doing blood rituals, but blood is very important to magnetize the blood. So next is Capricorn in the knees. The knees are one of those, it's said that they're one of those mysterious parts of the body which, if you look at them structurally, shouldn't really work, but in the end they hold up our body, they hold great weights. But yet they're also so flexible. So there's an interesting mystery in the knees, but Capricorn and Saturn governs the knees. Finally you have the calves for Aquarius, and then finally the feet for Pisces.